Good evening. My name is Dick Clay, and I'm the president and CEO of the Filson Historical Society. Thank you for joining us this evening, whether you're here in person or watching the recorded program online. We're delighted to partner with the Christina Lee Brown Envirome Institute to bring you the Theodore Sedgwick Distinguished Lecture Series. Now, we will begin this evening's program with remarks from Dr. Aruni Bhatnagar. But I very much want again to thank the Christina Lee Brown Envirome Institute for this particular lecture series and for bringing the ambassador to us this evening. And welcome to the Filson.
Thank you, Dick, and welcome everybody, and good evening. My name is Aruni Bhatnagar, and I'm the director of the Christina Lee Envirome Institute at the University of Louisville. At the Institute, we are a group of scholars and teachers and faculty or researchers who are dedicated to creating new knowledge and trying to understand the totality of our environmental conditions. And this relates not only to the environment that we live in, but also the type of choices we make and how we interact with the world outside of us to understand human aging and human growth and well-being. And we are dedicated to the cause because most of the medicine to date has been sort of focused on disease, and they have been looking at health through the lens of disease, but you've not really understood health per se. So as the new vision of health, we are pursuing the Envirome Institute's agenda in recognizing that the health is not merely the absence of disease, but that it is a resource that's derived from being in the community and being able to do and accomplish what we really want to do. And to be living in environments that are conducive and unpolluted and healthy, so that not only our own activities, but our world around us supports our health. This lecture series, this embraces this larger view of health, and it investigates topics that impart health to our families and to our communities and to our neighbors. It is my honor to introduce today Ambassador Todd Sedgwick. Ambassador Sedgwick serves as a scholar in residence at the Envirome Institute, and it is his curiosity and his intellect that are the inspiration for this wide array of subjects that addresses through these lectures. And we are very pleased today that Ambassador Sedgwick is here and that he has a distinguished guest that he's going to introduce. So we invite Ambassador to come.
Thank you, Rennie. I'm really appreciative that all of you came to hear this talk about Central Europe, because it's a part of the world that is not very well understood. And I had the privilege of serving there for quite a while. I knew Ambassador Javorčík. I was the ambassador to Slovakia. Ambassador Javorčík is the ambassador from Slovakia to the United States. But when I was there from 2010 to 2015, I knew him quite well, although he was too good of a tennis player for me. I played with his brother a lot, who's at the European Union, and but he has had a very distinguished career. He was ambassador to Israel, to NATO, and he spent 4 years in London as well. And it's a great honor to have you come out to Louisville, Kentucky. I just want to spend a couple of minutes talking about my perspective about Slovakia, just for a couple of minutes, because I want to leave, obviously, all the time for Ambassador Javorčík. I was, like I say, I was ambassador from 2010 to 2015. I'm actually going to Slovakia tomorrow, and I'm landing in Vienna, and I'm going to take the boat down to Bratislava, which is just an hour and a quarter. It's a very pleasant way of going. A lot of people go there on Viking cruises and so forth. But I want to talk a little bit about, I'm sure you all read in the paper and so forth, the prime minister was shot. And I want to talk a little bit about that, because when my reaction, I was very shocked myself, because all my time in Slovakia, I had security detail, but I really never needed it. It's a very peaceful country, and they're horrified by any kind of gun violence. So this is I just want to point out that very peaceful country, and this kind of gun violence is extremely unusual. It's only when I got back to Georgetown and Washington that I needed my security. Of course, I didn't have it. Anyways, I want to explain a little bit about, because a lot of people have come up to me and said, well, geez, this sounds like the beginning of World War III, because you remember Gavrilo Princip assassinated the Archduke Ferdinand. And so isn't this similar? And I want to explain a little bit about the recent history of the region and explain why it's not going to break out in World War III. You see, all those countries in blue, including Slovakia, are members of the European Union, which was an initiative that was really championed originally by Washington, by the United States. And we felt in the 50s, what was it called? The European Coal and Steel. And that was started with just a handful of countries, and then it's expanded over almost the entire continent. And the whole purpose was we shouldn't have any more land wars in Europe. And, the only land war in Europe that's happened since then, since World War II, is outside the European Union, in the Balkans. And that's the area that we need to watch out for. But Slovakia is a very stalwart member of the European Union and NATO. So there's no chance that that's going to trigger some greater calamity. But I actually worked, the prime minister who was shot, I worked with him very closely for 4 years. And I found him to be, Washington frankly didn't like him very much because they were suspicious that he was very kind of pro-Russian. But he was basically neutral. He said, I can work with Russians, I can work with the Chinese, I can work with the Americans. And so he had a very good he was not that interested in foreign affairs, foreign policy. He was more interested in domestic policy. So I worked with this foreign minister who was extremely pro-Western, pro-NATO, pro-EU. And so we got a lot done at that time. Now, since then, in my opinion, and I'm speaking from the American point of view and from my personal point of view, that Prime Minister Fico, his name is Fico, F-I-C-O, but it's pronounced Fico. He has turned, he's kind of an opportunist, and he turned quite populist because he's very close to the people in the country and the villages. And I think the people in the villages decided that they're tired of helping the Ukrainians, that they shouldn't bear that burden. And so he's kind of more pro-Russian now, which of course Washington is very discouraged about. But anyways, I found him very easy to work with. He controlled the whole government, and it was a parliamentary system, and so he controlled all the ministries. And so he never went back on his word. And so anyways, I'm really delighted that my friend Radovan Javorčík is able to join us tonight. So Ambassador, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Todd, for kind words. Thanks, Christy, for all your work you've done for this state, for this city, for this community. And thank you, Filson. And I would like to congratulate to Filson, 140 years. It's quite a time, quite a record. When I was looking at the webpage of Filson, I was really upbeat, and I was like, yes, I'm going to one of the oldest buildings in the United States. And it turned out that I'm coming to one of the youngest, one of the most beautiful. But the mission of Filson is really something which we in Europe would be a little bit jealous, because it's about the history, the native people, expanding relationship with the underrepresented communities. And it's exactly what we have to do everywhere in the world, not only in the United States, but definitely in Europe, where you drive like 2 hours in your car and you have different community, different language. A few years ago, different currency. Here in the US, you drive 6 hours, you still speak, I almost said Spanish. You speak English. In Florida, you speak Spanish. You speak English. You pay with the same US dollar. And you drive on the same side of the road. So it's honestly, it's really fascinating. So I'm really glad to be here. It's with my wife Michelle. This is our first time in Kentucky, first time in Louisville. We'll enjoy it. And Now, before I will go to the hard political debates or thoughts, let me give you a few perhaps boring details and facts. First, the facts. There are not too many Slovaks in Kentucky, in the state of Kentucky. I looked into the data, and it's 0.075% of the population. So I'm just wondering who is less than the Slovaks. But there's a connection between Kentucky and Slovakia, and it's thanks to Ohio River, which flows and starts in Pittsburgh, which is the second largest. I would say it's the largest Slovak city in the world. There are roughly 300,000 people with Slovak descent. They mostly were working in coal mines and the steel mills. And U.S. Steel, which is based in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, has the only facility outside of the U.S. in Slovakia, in the far east of the Slovakian town called Košice. Now the U.S. Steel is going to be taken over by the Nippon Steel, so there will be no connection like that. But the Ohio River is just wonderful, wonderful river. We've been to Pittsburgh several times, so I'm glad to see that it's running through the city as well, and it's bringing a lot of wealth and prosperity to Louisville as well. To give you another comparison between Slovakia and Kentucky, in Kentucky you have 4.5 million people. In Slovakia we are 5.5 million, so it's more like Indiana. And the GDP per capita, that's the how good is our economy doing, is not that bad. The US per capita is for $64,000 US. Slovakia is 44,000. We still have something to do to match the US, but at least where we match the US is the price of gasoline. We pay $6 per gallon. But I have to say, our public transportation and railway system is a little bit better than here in the US. And there is one connection, specific connection of my family and Kentucky. I didn't know. I learned today that we are proud owners of Ford cars, and Ford Escape we own now is built here in Kentucky. So those are fun facts. But I know that some of you have been to Slovakia, but I always start my lectures with a few facts about Slovakia to materialize it a little bit. First of all, we are car manufacturers. We are the largest car manufacturer in the world per capita, per head. We produce 1.2 million cars a year. So if you think that this shiny German Porsche Cayenne are built in Germany, no, they are not built in Germany. They are built in my hometown. If you think that the Volvo electric cars are built in Georgia, state of Georgia, no, they are not. They will be built in Slovakia. If you think that the Jaguar Land Rover is built in Britain, yes, but the electric car is built in Slovakia. So, and if you think that the Americans had the last man on the moon, no, he was Slovak. Eugene Cernan is Evgen Chernian. So there you go, and I can go on and on and on, and well, just to keep the younger generation a little bit more happy. Maybe those who know drummer from Foo Fighters and Nirvana, Dave Grohl, he is Slovak, as well as Bon Jovi, John Bon Jovi, and other actors, and Angelina Jolie as well. But she doesn't like her father, so, and he was Slovak, so please keep that sound. No, okay. Now to be a little bit more serious, and now to give you one small disclaimer, when I will be talking about history is two words: his story. So take me a little bit with this distance. Whatever we say in Europe about the history is our view of the history. And maybe sometimes the facts are a little bit distorted. But what I would like to tell you is from where the Slovaks came from, what is Central Europe, and why America and Central Europe have to have connections and strong connections and presence of Central Europe in the US. Why is it not so important in the American presence in Central Europe, which is far away for many people? Why it matters to all of us. Well, I was asked by somebody downstairs from where the Slovaks came. I have no idea, but we were there when the Romans were there, when the Romans built their fortification towards the north. We still were there, and we were providing them with some spas. We learned how to make wine, and there are still some Roman remnants from that time. So we were there. But then the Celts came, then the Hungarians came, the Magyars came. So everybody was coming and going. And basically what Slovakia was, because that's in the center of Europe, we're always in a crossroads of things, of trade, of movement of people, of religions. Because when you look into the map of Europe, you have the Roman Catholics, which are basically Roman Catholic churches, the western part. Then you have the middle part, which is half Roman Catholic, half Protestant, and then you have the Orthodox. Then when you talk about Cold War, again, we were in the middle. We were on the wrong side of the Iron Curtain. Again, we were on the periphery of the wrong side of the curtain. But we were on the crossroads, and we were on the borders. But we never we never let ourselves down. Many people and many tribes and nations are saying, oh, we're brave. We endured so many generations and years under the rule of somebody else. Well, the Slovaks were 1100 years in Hungarian kingdom. And many people say, well, we were under the Hungarian kingdom. No, we were part of the Hungarian kingdom. That's what I always stress and say. We're part of that kingdom, and we're part of building that history and then bridge between nations in the Central Europe, which was fabulous for many things, including making wars. And for that, we were quite well known. But we as Slovaks, as a nation, we came out from the darkness of the history books in 1980, thanks to American President Woodrow Wilson and his 10 commandments, what we call 10 commandments, 10 points. And one of the points was saying that all nations have the right for self-determination. And we took it literally. And when the Austro-Hungarian monarchy, which was the Austria-Hungary, Czech Republic, Slovakia, part of the former Yugoslavia, that big patch which was in the center just dissolved because they were not able to hold together all the tribes, all the nations. We just merged out from that World War I catastrophe, and we created with the Czechs the most democratic nation or state of that time. Just remind me that I will remind you that the women were given the right to vote in 1920, and our first constitution prohibited any disadvantages or any discrimination on race, what we call now gender. At that time, there was no word gender, sexual orientation, religion. These were the things in 1918 which were ingrained in our first constitution. So we're really like one of the most forward going nations, including respecting the national minorities. So let me remind you, in former Czechoslovakia, there were 15 million people, 3 million Germans, 500,000 Hungarians, and the rest were Czechs and Slovaks. There were many Jews as well. But this was the democratic home for many nations, which were not like small, tiny minorities. These were large minorities, including German. And the economy was pretty booming, and all the inventions around the cars and automotive were dated from that time. With this part of the history, what I'm trying to say is how important it was for all these nations to being recognized, and all those nations were willing to contribute to the peace of that time in Europe. With the Czechs, we were really a potent military might, only 15 million, but it was one of the best. We had, our army was one of the best equipped in Europe. Our cars were one of the best sought for in Germany and France. electricity and hydropower plants were one of the best in the world. So there was quite a lot of innovation, what we would call now, in research and development. Let me remind you that this was not just out of the blue. The oldest technical university in the world still functioning is not in Britain or France. It's in Slovakia. It's a mining academy, which is called a mining university in these days. And it was established in 1735. And that one is not that old. The oldest university on the territory of Slovakia is Academia Istropolitana, which was like a general university established in 1491. So there is a lot of research, education, and knowledge in that part of the world, despite of the diversity of small tribes and nations and families. The education was really a major part of our life. Now, if I can take you a little bit to fast forward of the 20th century, which was century of two wars, from the view of a Slovak family. Were established with the Czechs as the Czechoslovakia in 1918. Everything was nice and beautiful. Then we had a big recession. Not everything was so fine, but okay, we survived. In 1938, there was Germany was expanding, and there was a Munich conference where the big powers decided that Czechoslovakia has to cede some of the territory to Germany, because there were German-speaking Czechoslovaks who wanted to live under Germany. And it was a piece of our time by Neville Chamberlain, signed by the French, German, Italians, and British. And suddenly Czechoslovakia ended their existence because of the wish of at least two nations, France and Germany, saying, well, okay, if these Germans want to, sorry, France and the UK, Britain, if Germans want to take a little bit of land from Czechoslovakia, who the hell? Just give them the territory and they will be okay. Does it ring the bells? 2022. Then after World War II, when we were part of the victorious allied nations, we thought that everything will be nice again. We were not so badly affected by World War II. Although I had to remind Ambassador Sedgwick that this week we commemorate 80 years when the American liberators bombarded the largest refinery in Slovakia. But that was part of the war. We were on the wrong side of the war. The Slovak war government was on the side of Nazi Germany, so that was a legitimate target. We don't complain. So the war ended. We were on the side of the victorious allies. But what happened was division of Europe once again. Three nations: Britain, U.S., Soviet Union, in Yalta in 1945 decided, well, let's split Europe so we don't mingle into somebody else's backyard. And unfortunately, we were left on the wrong side of the division line. And again, does it ring the bells? If somebody says, well, okay, I will keep an eye on this part of the world, don't mess with that, leave it to somebody else. And it's 2024, and we are hearing the same argument. Then in 1968, we had the Prague Spring, when the Social Democrats or the modernized communists wanted to come with a better version of the communist regime, and liberated the souls of writers, artists, and let people travel. Guess what happened? A country to the east from Czechoslovakia, Soviet Union, came and said, no, guys, you have no right to determine where you want to begin, where you want to belong. You have to belong to our sphere of influence, and that's it. No Prague Spring, no free arts, no free research, no free travel. You will stay put and you will work as we say. Does it ring the bells? Maybe yes. Then what happened was fall of Berlin Wall, 1989, which was really a remarkable moment for all of us, because I was at the university. My wife Michelle, she just joined the university, and we were happily marching on the streets and non-violently asked down the communists to step down. Well, they didn't want, but they did. They did. And the reason why they did was not because we were wielding some weapons or knives or whatever. The biggest weapon was a freedom of mind, and it was a freedom how we got some information. And again, thanks to the US, Voice of America, Radio Free Europe, they were sponsored by US government. And through that, we knew what is happening on the other side of the Iron Curtain, and that our government is lying to us all the time, every day, every second. So we ended with a communist regime, and we just knocked on the door of the Western countries, saying, guys, we never left Europe. We were part of the Europe, but there was this Iron Curtain, and we want to join NATO because that's the organization which secured Europe from wars. And we want to join what now we know the European Union, because that's the market where we want to be. That's where we want our kids to learn. That's where we want to trade, where we want to just travel and make friends. And the first response was, okay, let's make some like Central European, whatever, gray zone, and stay somewhere else. Don't mess with our backyard, the nice Western European prosperous backyard. And again, who came? The Americans. They said, well, guys, this is the outstretched hand of friendship. Join us if you will fulfill all the criteria. And we started to do our job, and we started to fulfill the criteria. Yes, we Slovaks, we are funny people. Sometimes we are encouraged by things and we start doing things, and then we plunge down. When we plunge down, we allow our secret police to kidnap a son of the president and these kind of nasty things. And we voted down that prime minister who ordered kidnapping of the son of the president. And it took us 9 years to recognize that kind of governance will not take us anywhere. And again, that prime minister was not led by any like specific intentions. He just wanted to hold on power, and he realized that, well, the rules of engagement and the rules of game on the Western side of the Western Europe, that's not for him. So he turned to Moscow, and Moscow said, yes, go ahead. No problem. Do business with us. We will not meddle with you. You will do your job. We will give you gas for a better price, and you will just be nice little guy in Central Europe, just making sure that Europe will not be united and strong. Then we voted down that prime minister. Became, thanks to the leadership of US, once again, members of NATO in 2002, and we thought that like everything is fine. Yeah, everything is sorted out. Unfortunately not. This was not the case because the dark forces in Russia were coming back to life. In 90s, Russia was economically down, militarily nowhere. There was some sort of democracy in Russia, which was really violent and which was not the best place to be. But we all thought like, okay, Russia is down. We don't have to care about that. They are around the table. We worked with them after Boris Yeltsin stepped down and Vladimir Putin came in 2000. They were every single day in NATO headquarters. They were talking to us. We were exercising with them. We thought like, wow, this is great. The biggest enemy and a foe of Europe in past 70 years, except for Nazi Germany, the Soviet Union, is suddenly the good guy. You could do business with them. You can trade with them. They are business people. And we started to be a little bit more dependent on their gas. We were more dependent on their thoughts. And the Russians just started to dislike the free world, because in the free world you have to be responsible, you have to be transparent, and if you are corrupt, you are voted down. And in Russia, this is not the way how things are. If you are not part of Verkhushka, what they call Verkhushka, it's the top layer of advisors of the president. You are down. You are not there. You cannot do business. So that was the starting point of turning things around when Russia was implying on the rest of Europe their views, how their legitimate interests. Every country has interest. That's fully legitimate. But what we were saying is that every relationship can be win-win. In the Russian narrative, you cannot have win-win. You have to have zero sum. If somebody gains, somebody has to lose. So when we entered the European Union and NATO, it was a loss for Russia. When the Baltic states up there joined NATO, that's when Russia lost, because they thought it's the past Soviet territory. When Romania, Bulgaria joined, it was like, okay, another people in the background, backyard joining in. Then in 2014, what happened? The Ukrainians said, well, okay, finally, we are dropping the neutrality and we want to join NATO, mutedly. But more important, they say, we want to join EU. And Russians said, no. So what Russians did, they didn't start it in 2014. They started in 2008 with Georgia and with just asserting their powers. But in 2014, the Russians just came in and just grabbed Crimea. That's it. Whatever you can hear from Russians that, well, Crimea was in the past part of Russian Empire or Russia. Okay, that's their history. That's true fact. But the fact is that Crimea belonged to Ukraine when Soviet Union was dissolved. Those were the international borders the Russians signed up to. They signed with Britain, US, and France, so-called Budapest Protocol, that secured the Ukrainian borders as we see it on that map, no other. And the payback from the Ukrainians was that they they gave up their nuclear weapons. So Russians signed to international law saying you don't change your borders by force. Second, they gave their own guarantees to Ukrainians that they will not change their political system, they will not change their borders. What they did in 2014, they changed the borders, they tried to change the political regime. And what we have seen in 2022, there you go, even more, full-scale war. Why I'm saying this? The Central Europe is a patchwork of small nation tribes. And every good Machiavellian ruler is looking for weak spots of your enemy or would-be enemy. I can tell you one story about me in the late 90s, when still we were in good shape with Russians. Russian diplomat told me, well, you're my friend now, but once you will join NATO, you will become my enemy. It was 1999. And that's what is happening now. Russia is respecting NATO, but the NATO before the end of Cold War, they are respecting that one. The rest, for them, is new reality, which is against their own interest. And what they are seeking now are those small, tiny countries, which are the weakest link in that equation, trying to break the unity of EU and NATO, which are really the best partners of America, whether it's in Europe, in China, in Africa. Now, many people are saying, well, what is the end state of Ukrainian war? I don't know, the Ukrainians, because they are under attack, they have to say what was the end state. But what we know, and that's my assumption as well, that what Russia needs and wants is to have like a gray zone of countries and nations which will not do anything against the interest of Russia, including the commercial ones. And that's big no, even here in America. You can trade with whoever, but you cannot deny somebody to do business with. So from my point of view, the next targets are for Russians, because they already targeted Ukraine, they targeted Georgia. Next is Moldova. That's split in half. There is eastern part which is physically controlled by Russia. Once they will get down to that one, what they want is to achieve full control of Black Sea coast over there. That was the old dream of the Russian Tsars, and it's something which they crave for still. Now, the second sea they want to join is the Baltic Sea. They have the Kaliningrad, Königsberg part, But obviously, these three nations, Estonia, Lithuania, Latvia, they are sore in their back. They really want to get something out of it, not to be hindering their access to the sea. I understand them, but it can be done differently than by force. So last thing which I want to say, and then open the for Q&A, is to say a few words about relationship between Central Europe and USA. I think it's a relationship of friend, partner, and ally. As I told you, my capital after World War I was supposed to not to be called Pressburg or Pozsony as it was before, but it was supposed to be called Wilson Town in name of President Wilson. It's not. It's called Bratislava. It's too difficult to pronounce, but yes. The only foreign ministry in the world which has in the middle in our garden statue of a foreign leader is my foreign ministry. It's Woodrow Wilson's bust and his statue, and we do not pray. We pay respect to him every single year in autumn. So from friends who were looking after each other, and for a country like me, 5.5 million people, since 1870, when the census of immigrants to United States started to register from which part of Austro-Hungarian monarchy comes who, when the first Slovak came, until today, 2 million people from the territory of Slovakia came to United States, 2 million. So it's almost half, it's 1/3 of population. So we have, I think we have something to say about the United States. And we are grateful for all those people who could find their livelihood in the United States. And they are paying back. And the payback is that whenever Europe is in peril, and being it wartime, being it in research and development, US is there to give either assurance of stability or to give opportunity to grow. I am the bad ambassador because I have no idea how many Slovak students are studying in the United States. It's several hundreds. But I can tell you one thing. We were in Stanford University in California, in San Francisco, with my president in January. We thought there are 3. Suddenly 10 of them appeared from somewhere, thin air. So you never know. There might be at the University of Kentucky, there might be some Slovaks. But we are cross-populating each other. And if somebody is saying that Europe has to be more empowered, they're given more time, more responsibility for our own affairs, yes, that's true. But I will remind everybody that it was thanks to the United States that we were able to build the European Union, because the United States was there saying, guys, you will not fight. We will create NATO, you will create the European Union, which will make guarantee that you will not fight, and you will make your resources so you can provide good fortune, a future for your kids. Now, if this will end somehow, if the US would withdraw from Europe, I'm not saying that the Europe would crumble, but I can make you sure that all those countries on the eastern side, on the right border of those yellowish countries, will have a problem to survive, and not because we are not capable, but where do we do business? We do business in Europe, which is 22 languages, 350 million people. But if you want to be successful in the world, and it's being the European, Central European, Asian, you have to be successful in the United States. And if you think how many inventions were created in the US, how many patents? Many, millions. But I will give you one to think whether it was worthwhile of having good relationship with Europeans, and in this case Slovaks. How many of you go fish? The reel? Yeah, it was invented by a guy from Slovakia. A priest. His name was Murgash, and he lived in Pennsylvania, and he invented many things. The fishing reel, and he invented Wi-Fi. He was the first guy who connected to It was 9 miles. It was it's 0G, but okay. No, to be honest, if Europe wants to be first, as America wants to be first, I don't have a problem if somebody says America first, but there is Europe first. But we want to be first in recognizing where are the dangers, where are the opportunities to grow, and first to spot the best partner to do business. And we can look around anywhere. The best partners for Americans are Europeans, and the best partners for Europeans are Americans. And so with that, I leave the rest of this time for questions and answers. And I promise that I will not speak as ambassador, and I will speak as somebody who lived in Israel, in Britain, in NATO, and in the United States. So I'm all yours.
Well, thank you very much, Radovan. That was a great tour de force there. It was fantastic talk. And before we get into Q&A, I just want to recognize Christy Brown here, who made all this possible tonight. So Radovan and I are kind of two sides of the same coin. So if you have any questions for either one of us, but mostly for Radovan, let's get going. Who has the first question? Yes, sir.
Senators is opposed to providing aid to Ukraine. You're right next to Ukraine, and the conflict they had with Russia. That senator said we ought to focus our money and energy on problems in the United States rather than wasting money on a country that's not right.
Yeah, I fully understand that. Yes, when you're a taxpayer, you want to know where your money goes, and when you see like rising crime, abuse of narcotics and other things, China rising, whatever. Yes, okay, that's a legitimate question. My answer to that is, you just cannot leave a bully to bully somebody else. I mean, Russians. And now I will not be kidding. You all think that Alaska is American, that you bought it from Russia. But there are serious people talking that, well, that it was not sold to Americans. We have to claim it back. Once we will let the Russians to bleed the Ukrainians to death and occupy and change the borders, where they will stop. They have nuclear weapons. Guys, wake up. This is not just a small tribe fighting somebody else, somebody in the woods of Slovakia. Well, tribes can fight there, but this is way bigger. This is way bigger.
I am of the opinion that NATO, especially the United States, is giving Ukraine just enough military support to keep from losing the war, but not enough to win the war. How long has it taken to provide F-16s, for an example? Would you speak to that?
Perhaps I'm a bad guy to talk about it, because we gave our MiG-29s to Ukrainians last year, and we gave our only malfunctional air defense system to Ukrainians in April 22. So we were the small country next door. We're providing to Ukraine whatever we could. Unfortunately, our barracks and our stocks are so low that we hardly can give anything sensible to Ukrainians. But what we were telling to the Congress people, to this administration, both sides of the aisle in the Congress, don't think that you will escalate with your aid to Ukraine. You are giving it to Ukrainians, and Ukrainians are fighting. It's not the Americans, girls and boys. It's not the Slovak soldiers. Well, there are some guys without passport fighting there, but these are individuals. But we are not fighting there, and it's just for us. It was frustrating to see that we were fighting among each other over the Atlantic. Who is giving more money? Who is giving more weapons? We should have done way better at the beginning. Now we are getting slightly better, not enough. But I will like to let your focus come to NATO summit in Washington DC next month. There will be certain things announced. Obviously, it will not be providing I don't know how many hundreds of F-16s and F-35s, but it will be good announcement saying that Ukrainians have full backing of NATO, and if they will need anything, including bilateral guarantees of their security, we will do our best. I cannot provide you a better answer, but yes, we should have done better collectively, and some countries more. But we as Slovaks, we have clear consciousness. We have done what we could at the time.
I will add to that Slovakia devoted a quarter of its defense budget to military aid to Ukraine. It was $500 million, huge commitment on their part. So channeling Dick Clay here, please, if you have a question, please step up to the microphone. Yes, ma'am.
Thanks very much for your talk. I really appreciated it. Well, Slovakia is kind of sandwiched between Hungary and Poland in some ways. And Hungary has very much taken a very nativist stand on immigration, whereas Poland has taken a much more, quite a bit more open in terms of accepting the Ukrainians. So I wonder how Slovakia is kind of navigating the difficult path of figuring out what your policy is toward immigration.
Well, I would split that question into two, because immigration, with regard to Ukrainians, that's not so divisive. The only trouble with the Hungarians is that their language is damn difficult. Their grammar is easy. That's what I was told. But their word for mother is nothing like mama or mother or that. That's to learn that language it's quite a feat. So I understand that not many Ukrainians wanted to settle in Hungary. There were, I think, 4 million Ukrainians who crossed through Ukraine to Europe. In Slovakia, we're in the same position. 4 million or 5 million, 4.5 million crossed through Slovakia, through the borders of Slovakia. 140,000 still are in Slovakia, mostly women, children, and elderly people. So on that part, Hungary is sort of okay. The problem is with migration outside of Europe. And forgive me my French, the argument about migration in Europe is resembling some arguments here in the US when you hear about illegal migrants spreading the disease. There are terrorists, they're unvetted, they bring narcotics, criminals, whatever. Those narratives, if you Google translate from English to whatever language in Europe and back, you might be amazed that it's really similar. And that's the problem. That's the problem, that we not in every corner of Europe, migrants from outside of Europe are welcome. And there are many superstitions, many prejudices. We have to learn a lot about these people, and we have to understand that migration per se is not a bad thing. It has to be handled properly, and it has to have rules. Unruly kids in a classroom are as bad as unruly immigrants.
Thank you.
Hi, ambassadors. Thank you so much for that very, very interesting overview about Slovakia. My name is Xiu Yan. I'm the president of World Affairs Council, and I'm curious from where you stand, particularly where we are right now, the precarious state that you outlined for many of the states that really border the Ukraine, Bulgaria, and those and Russia. What do you think about Russia? What's driving them? Are they interested in containment, or are they interested in expansion? Ultimately, by their actions, do they want to? Are they just worried that NATO is going to keep on expanding closer and closer, or do they actually want to expand the empire of Russia? Thank you.
What you hear from the Russians is that what I was trying to allude a little bit is that you respect the NATO. You have to respect our national interests. I said they are legitimate. Each nation has strategic interests. I don't deny that. Even Slovakia has strategic interests. But the problem with Russia is that they never understood that NATO enlargement, we are not talking about expansion. This is like a vocabulary thing. Expansion is that you go and expand. Enlargement is slightly difficult because nobody invited, well, technically and legally, yes, we were invited to join NATO, but nobody came in 1990, 91 or 98. Hey, Slovaks, come to NATO. No. It was just the opposite. I remember in 1994 when Partnership for Peace, which was like a military program between NATO and former Warsaw Pact nations, they said, well, this is like a waiting chamber in the doctor's lounge. You will stay there and maybe we will call you, blah, 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 blah. So no, there was a huge resistance of taking new nations in because there were some political issues, but because the main thing is, if you give Article 5 security guarantee to somebody, it has to be serious. You just cannot expand to Slovakia, which is not willing to contribute, which is not defendable, which is not sharing the same values, the same type of governance. You just cannot do that because once you will say, okay, we will not defend Slovakia. So why would we then take, what shall we do with Germany? What shall we do with Finland and Sweden now? Norway. If you don't defend one, you don't defend anybody. So what the Russians are trying to do, because they never changed their post-imperial view of world. The Germans did it, the British, the French, the Spanish, the Italian. Now I perhaps say the Americans did the post-imperial reckoning. Russians never did it. When you talk to Russians in Russian, not the Russian language, but in Russian vocabulary, there are things you have to understand or you can understand only when you live with them and when you answer what is the meaning. Because Russia, for many Russians, is not finishing here. It's finishing somewhere here. It's the worldview that, or it's this perception that Russia is way bigger. It's the Central Asian countries. It's part of Mongolia, for example, as well. Now I'm a little bit exaggerating, but the Central Asian republics, definitely. That's for them. Yes, this is our kingdom. Nobody has to say anything about it. And if somebody would say, well, it's similar to relationship between the U.S. and Mexico. Would any U.S. government allow Russians to deploy their military in Mexico? Well, that would be a trouble. But I'm sure that Mexico will never allow Russia to make their military bases there because their way of governance is different. So for Russians, what they want to achieve is now to have this grayish zone of regimes or governments which will not endanger their own interests. That's it. They don't want to have at their borders free-thinking governments. Why Czechoslovakia was in 1947 after World War II, when we had almost a famine and we joined the Marshall Plan. We were forced out by the Soviets from the Marshall Plan. And the only reason was, if you accept some assistance from Americans or from the West, you are sort of bound with them, and that's it. That's no go for the Russians.
Good afternoon, Ambassador. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Easton Depp, and my question is, do you think that there's a difference in thinking on Russia between the countries that were in the Soviet bloc and those that were outside of it?
Yes, there was, but I'm saying it was consciously, because if you see what President Macron of France is saying in recent months, it's change of attitude. He was betrayed by Putin himself. On the 20th of February 22, Macron, when he talked to Putin on the phone, Putin told him basically, I'm paraphrasing, okay, I will figure it out. Meaning I will not attack. And he attacked. So Macron figured out, well, hey, hang on, I cannot do real business with this guy. Yes, if you take the Baltics, if you take the Poland, the Polish, Czechs, Slovaks, Hungarians, Bulgarians, Romanians, we have different physical connectivity with Russians, some mythological, some real. But if you lived under Russian, and I'm not saying Soviet, Russian occupation for decades, you just cannot forget that, because you know what it is. And it was not like occupational, okay, you can rule and you have some sort of pretended sovereignty. They were swallowed by the Russians, / Soviets. So that's the reason. But now the Germans and French and the Spanish and the British, they understood. And that was the lesson learned from Munich 38, and then Prague Spring of 68, and the Budapest Revolution of 56. No, we cannot let them go and do that, because they will repeat it. They will do it again. They will do it again somewhere else. So the rhetoric is changing.
Any other questions?
One.
Yes, sir.
I've been to Czechoslovakia, Czech Republic, and Slovakia, all those times. And I noticed it seems like the Czechs all relate to the Western, but Slovakians, my opinion, many of them were towards the West, but many of them were very pro-Russian. You've spoke more about the Slovakians who are pro-Western, but it seems to me there are a good portion who are pro-Russian or Soviet at the time. So speak about that.
Yeah. When you take some opinion polls in Slovakia, roughly half of the people believe that the whole Ukrainian situation was created by Ukrainians or by the Americans. Yeah, and there are two reasons. One is this mythological connectivity between the Slovaks and the Russians, the Slavic togetherness, the all Slavic movement, which dates to mid-19th century, which was totally mythological. There is no real, it was debunked hundreds and hundreds of times. But the mythology is nice because it's simple. It gives you a nice narrative. It's peaceful many times. The Budapest betrayed us in 1848. Budapest betrayed us. The Vienna betrayed us. Poles didn't like us. So okay, the Russians were there and they were willing to help us. How the hell they could help us in mid-19th century? No way. So there was this nice mythology, and the great Russian poets with their flamboyant verses, and so that's mythology. And then there is a second thing, which is more present, and it's more general, and it applies to part of the U.S. society as well. It's disinformation and misinformation and misuse of social media and platforms. Just to give you one example, the Facebook account of Russian embassy in Bratislava is more active than the Chinese embassy in Paris, and not just by few numbers. It's like 4 times more active. It's 10 times more active than Russian embassy in Berlin. And most of the Facebook accounts and YouTube accounts, which are used by influencers, by political influencers. I don't mean like what's the name of the girlfriend of Trevor Kelsey, the lady. If you take 10 most active Facebook and YouTube channels, these are confirmed or almost confirmed agents or sympathizers of Russia, paid or unpaid. That's true. That's reality. That's data. Now the problem is how to fight with that, with this information, and it's so well ingrained, and it was neglected, and perhaps that's part of the problem of me as a person who works for the country as a civil servant 30 years. We're sleeping on our laurels since 2004 when he joined the EU and NATO. Said, oh, everything's fine, everything's sorted out. And when you had this creeping misinformation coming in, you just cannot take it out so quickly. So those are the two routes why the Slovak community is perhaps more Russian leaning. Why the Czechs are less Russian leaning? It has to do with the history, with the Czech kingdom and the education. The Charles University is the oldest still functioning Central European university. It's the Enlightenment, when the Czech part of the Austro-Hungarian kingdom was the most developed part of Austro-Hungarian monarchy, and the Slovakia was the most developed part of Hungarian monarchy. But we were still like, light years away from the Czechs. So it's more about the education and perhaps something a little bit to do with religion. And I talked with somebody downstairs. The Czechs are Protestants, they are Lutherans, and way before Martin Luther, the priest called Jan Hus was 200 years before Martin Luther. So the Czech mind was a little more enlightened than perhaps the Slovak one. And the Slovaks were after 1100 years as a part of Hungarian kingdom, as the nobility, as the masters changed their religion from Catholic to Protestant to Catholic, we changed as well. We're flexible people. We don't. But it shows later. It just shows that if you don't stick with some values and if you don't pay attention to education, critical thinking, as we call it now, then you have results as we have.
Yeah, before we close, just a quick comment on Russia. When I got to Bratislava, I asked, okay, what are the largest embassies in town? And the United States, as it is in most countries, is by far the largest. There's over 100 people. The second largest is Russian embassy. And then it went down to like 12, 6, 3 for the other countries. And I asked, well, what do these people do? And they said, well, basically they're spies. And not only that, but the ambassador himself was a former KGB. So anyways, let's give a big hand to the ambassador.